All right, today
Marjorie.
we have Dr. Marjorie Simpson back with us. She's a geriatric nurse practitioner, and she's been with us a few times now to discuss what she was seeing on the front lines in the fight of COVID. This time she's back today to talk to us about making sure we all do some planning. Everyone talks about making sure we're prepared with funeral arrangements, but are you and your family ready if you unexpectedly become severely sick or debilitated? Dr. Simpson, welcome, welcome back. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
So before we start, how are you? How's the family?
I'm doing great. Everybody's wonderful. COVID numbers are nice and low right now. That's wonderful to see. And glad to be back again on the show.
Awesome. All right,
Yep,
so
that's
tell
good.
us more about advanced care planning. What is it and what are you experiencing with that?
With advanced care planning, basically, individuals have a right to choose the healthcare interventions that they want or do not want based on their preferences. Sometimes, when people are seriously ill or have illnesses like dementia, they're unable to make their own decisions, either permanently or temporarily. And an advanced directive is a way to number one, select someone to help you make decisions if you're ever unable to make decisions yourself. And number two, state your preferences about the type of interventions you would want at the end of your life.
Yeah. Robbie?
So I'm just curious how a that the advanced directive would be different than, say, a power of attorney document.
So, in the United States and in Canada as well, each state that you're in, the wording can be a little bit different. So, a medical power of attorney and healthcare agent, those are all terms used for someone that you have designated to make healthcare decisions for you if you're ever incapable of making your healthcare decisions on your own. But each state and in Canada, different provinces use different language, but they all sort of mean the same thing. That person that you've selected that you trust to help you make decisions.
Okay. Ellen?
Yeah, so in regards to a lot of things involving health, we don't think about it until it's the last minute and it's something that is affecting us actively. So when should people start thinking about advanced care planning?
Anyone over the age of 18 can
Mhm,
develop an advanced directive, and they should.
mhm,
We don't like to think about these things, but I could be in a car accident on the way home today
yeah,
and be unconscious, be in a coma, and not be able to communicate my wishes.
right.
It's important that I have an advanced directive. So, number one, my family knows what my wishes are. And number two, my healthcare providers know who I want making decisions for me.
Right.
I have a question for you. So, my grandmother, she had an advanced directive, and she had one of my cousins as the person that she identified to take care of her if she were ever ill or sick or in the hospital. Now, what happens if you pick someone who may or may not have your best interest in mind? Let's say you made a mistake and the other family realizes that person does not have this individual's, like, for example, if they had were in the will, and if this person were to pass away, they would receive a large sum of money, right?
Mm.
So, like, if my grandmother were to pass away and the person who's taking care of her will receive a large sum of money, and the family is concerned about the decisions that that individual's making, my cousin, for example. What can the family do, or is it just we just have to deal with that?
Well, there's always legal protection for someone who is a vulnerable adult whose healthcare agent or family members are abusing them financially or um, not fulfilling their responsibilities as a healthcare agent. But I think that the important thing is to allow the healthcare providers, the doctors, physician's assistants and nurse practitioners involved in the care sort of be that guide. Um, and and if an intervention, a medical intervention such as placing a feeding tube comes up, what are the healthcare providers saying? Are they saying, "Hey, this is a really great idea," or are they saying, "This is really not something ethical to put a feeding tube in someone who's terminally ill or somebody who has dementia and doesn't have a lot of time left." But there are always legal provisions. I know that you can apply for emergency guardianship,
Mm,
and that would be, with an attorney through the court system, and
okay.
someone who is listed as a healthcare agent or medical power of attorney can be removed and a guardian can be appointed.
Yeah. Because I mean, I have to say, I wasn't sure that my cousin was making good decisions for my grandmother at the time, and but I was just curious if there was anything we could have done if we needed to have done that. Um, Ultimately, it
There's
didn't really matter in the end.
there's always protection. There's always protection for vulnerable adults, an adult who cannot make their own decisions, an adult who needs help with healthcare decisions. There are laws in every state protecting people, just like there are child protective laws, there are adult protective laws.
Awesome. Okay.
So I would recommend anybody who is in that situation, who is questioning what a healthcare agent is doing and choosing to do, contact an attorney and see if it is a possibility of pursuing legal guardianship.
Okay. Lizzie.
Does in terms of challenging, right, the advanced care, um, does religion play a part? Like, in a situation where Neo just described that, his grandmother, was in failing health and there were questions, right? But there are certain religions that say, okay, for example, Jehovah's Witness, they're not allowed to have a procedure where blood, is infused or included in trying to save someone. So, is religion considered when
Mhm.
these documents are taken care of, or is it just totally based on what the actual patient wants?
That's
Because I've
a
seen
great
it
question.
happen before, and I mean, even though the person has now passed on, they're still bickering back and forth over, well, that's not how she was raised.
Hmm.
That's not how we raised her in the faith. So how does religion play a part in these decisions?
Certainly, religion is a very important part of many people's lives, and there are some religions, as you say, Jehovah's Witness, that have certain practices, like refusing all types of blood products.
Hmm.
Having an advance directive, that is your opportunity to say, I'm Catholic. I want the sacrament for the sick if I am seriously ill. I'm a Jehovah's Witness. I do not want blood products. I'm afraid of, I helped somebody recently who was probably a little bit of a conspiracy theorist, was very afraid of
Oh.
remdesivir. Remdesivir rather. She said she never wanted that and put it in her advance directive. You can
Hmm.
put anything you want in your advance directive. And it since you have written it down and it is a legal document, then your healthcare providers have to follow that.
Wonderful. Rob.
And so how does one
Oh,
get
sorry. Go ahead.
started with the advanced? How does one get started with that?
So my favorite website is mydirectives.com. It's
Okay.
USA based through AD Vault, Advanced Directive Vault, and they have a mobile app. So you can go to mydirectives.com and it prompts that conversation and first sort of walks you through who to pick to be your healthcare agent and your backup healthcare agents. You need more than one.
Mm,
Sometimes
Ah, okay.
Sometimes
Mm.
people outlive their primary healthcare agent. We need
yeah.
somebody else to go to, or in a case where your healthcare agent is in the car with you when you're in a car accident and you're both
Ooh,
very.
Mhm.
So
Mm.
wow. Okay.
it does happen. It happened a lot during COVID, where husbands and wives were hospitalized at the same
Mm.
time on a ventilator, and they were each other's healthcare agent.
Okay.
So you need your backup. But this website is fantastic. It will help you complete an advance directive. You can choose to do a video if you don't like writing things down and you want to just pull up the app and make a video and say, hey guys, this is who I want and the reason why. This is what I do and what I do not want. And it will notify who you pick as your healthcare agent. So when I did mine, it notified my healthcare agent by email saying, Marjorie Simpson has selected you as a healthcare agent. Do you approve?
Mm.
And
Oh,
then it will also prompt you every year to go back and review it again and see if you want to make changes.
Love that.
So that
It's
could
it's a
that leads to what Neil was saying. Yeah, in case, you want to change your mind about something. Yeah. Okay.
it's a great website. It's used by consumers in over 50 countries. MyDirectives.com, and it is free, no charge.
I love that. The
Ooh,
the link is
nice.
in our description and all the platforms, so do check that out. Robbie?
so just to share a little bit about my experience right now, I'm actually going through the medical assistance in dying process with my father. And I've had a lot of support and a lot of well wishes, which is amazing. So when I found out you were coming to talk to us, I was like, hey, good. I can relate to what she's talking about. And it's so important to have these documents in place because I know that my dad prepared his estate. We made sure my name was on stuff. We had,
Mm.
with the power of attorney medical, some instructions like Lizzie posted in the chat, DNR, no feeding tube,
Do not
no. So
resuscitate.
exactly. So
Mhm.
he had those parameters that were set. And I know at one point my mom reached out to me and said, what can I do to help you? And I said, well, because of COVID, I'm the only visitor. There's only so much that you can
Mm,
do. I appreciate it. I said, one thing you can do for me, make sure that your affairs are in order. Start
Mm.
getting these documents in order. And every time she offered to help, it was like, spend that time getting these documents in order so that I don't have to fight with anyone, so that I know what the clear direction is, because those documents really help to provide a lot of clarity, especially when the person that you are caring for is in a lot of pain, is under
mm,
sedation, is under pain management, and you lose that lucidity. So you need to be that advocate. And I really like your idea of having the secondary, because I have the documents, but the person that's in charge would probably be the person in the passenger seat, or vice versa. So that's something to think about as well. So I really appreciate your insight and what you're sharing, and I just want to impart how important and valuable these documents are to the families that go through these experiences.
Yep.
And I always
I
tell
agree, Rob.
people it's
No, go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Dr. Marjorie.
I always say the real way that you start this is with what I call a kitchen table conversation. Sit down with your closest family members and bring it up and have that conversation. And it's terrible to think about, I might be in a car accident on the way
Mhm.
home and have a
Yeah.
severe traumatic brain injury, or I might, get a terrible disease or Alzheimer's disease someday. But what if? We plan, as Neo says, we plan for what happens after we die, our funeral, our last will and testament, what happens with our possessions.
Yep.
People need to take that time to plan about the type of care that they want if they only have a few hours, a few days, or a few months left to live. Where do you, what are your dying wishes? Where do you see yourself?
Right.
Do you see yourself in the critical care unit, hooked up to tubes and machines? Or do you see yourself at home surrounded by your family?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Lizzie, you had something you want
And
to
I
say?
know a lot. I was just gonna say. So both of my parents have passed on, right?
Hold on.
And
Um,
so I've
hold on, Lizzie, could you
so
start over?
both
I'm sorry.
so both of my parents have passed on. Most recently, my mom in 2013, and I agree wholeheartedly with what Rob had to say in that my mom was prepared with a lot of stuff. My sister was the power of attorney over her estate. She had all of her insurance documents, taken care of. We knew where to find things. She didn't have like a formal will, but she did have something that she wrote down, kind of, and that helped with the process. I think a lot of people don't want to have these conversations because they find it morbid or they find it to
Mhm.
be a jinx or whatever.
Hmm.
But at the same time, you have to consider what everyone's mindset is when someone
Mhm.
dies. We're not in the right frame of mind. People are
Yeah.
angry, people are upset, people are
Yep.
irrational. So if this is
Scared.
one less thing that you scared, exactly. So if this is one less
Mhm.
thing that you have to deal with at that time, it makes a world of difference. It really
Yep.
does. So I thank you,
Mhm.
Dr. Marjorie. Thank you, Rob, for sharing your story. It makes a
Yep.
difference. Trust me. Trust me.
Mhm.
I always tell people, if you can't stand the thought of sitting down and thinking about being on a ventilator, having feeding tube, being at the end of your life, and you just cannot do that, at least complete the healthcare agent's or medical power of attorney portion and pick someone to make these decisions for you if you are at the end of your life. At least have that in place, because if you don't pick that one person and your backup and your second backup, then it gets a little cloudy. There's a little gray area there as to who should be making decisions for you.
Hmm.
And in many states, in my state, in Maryland, unless you only a healthcare agent can withdraw care. Only a
Mm,
healthcare agent who's listed on that advance directive can say, no, it's time to come off of the life support.
Hmm.
It's time to allow his or her natural death to occur. So a healthcare agent, once it becomes that legal document, has a lot more power than just your next of kin would have if you don't have that in place.
We have time for just a couple more questions, but I just have a question. So, what if my directive is simply just to say, keep me alive as much as possible?
If that's what your wishes are, then that is what your wishes are. Then we will know to
Mhm.
follow your directive. And I have helped people complete advanced directives who say, "Hey, I want my last. It's important to me that we keep trying." And I say, "Well, that means that you're saying that you want to be on a ventilator. You want your last breath to be on that machine in critical
Mhm.
care, waiting for your heart to stop. Yes, that is what I want." If that's what your wishes are,
Mhm.
write it down.
Got it.
Get that
mm.
on
Mhm.
paper and write it down,
Because that's my wish.
because
Rob doesn't agree with me, but that's my wish.
No, no. And
Yeah.
and Rob mentioned that I, put in the chat, DNR, which means do not resuscitate, and that would be my wish. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I've had some incidents where I have been near death, and in reflecting
Mhm.
on that, I've always said, like, I don't want to be zapped 1,000 times. I don't want to be on a ventilator. I don't want to
Mhm.
be
Yep.
in a coma for weeks and months on end. Like if it's time, then it's time. Let me
Nope.
let me go.
Keep
Let
me
me go.
alive.
Let
Or
me go.
resuscitate me a
Because
million times if it takes if you
now just
can.
let me
See,
go.
Neil,
Let
and
me
that's
go.
why the stowaway
Yeah.
scenario exists.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm one of those people. I believe this is what I
Let
this
me
is all I
go.
got. This life is all I got.
No,
I don't know. I don't know about afterlives
I
and all
got
that stuff.
I
I
got
just
some
know
stuff
what I have
beyond this
right
life.
now. That's what I want. I want to keep
But
it
That's
I
fair.
but
long as I
you
can.
can you can also specify, and you can say, like, my advanced directive, I have a young son. I have a son who's 13. So even though I don't
Mhm.
want to be on a ventilator, I feel like right now, while he's so young, I need to have that type of care.
Of
But I
course.
Right.
put
Of
a
course.
limit to it. And I'm not going to stay on a ventilator forever. I specified a specific amount of time. You've got
So yeah.
this many
Okay.
days to
Yeah.
make it happen and for me to get better. And if I am not getting better in that many days, you're going to give me a big old dose of morphine and pull the plug while my family is around saying goodbye.
Not me.
So Neil, be as
That's my
specific
that's my
as
wish.
you can. Be as specific as you can. Be as
Fair
specific
enough.
as you
Yep.
All right, Ella, I'm gonna give you one last question, and then I have a question online as well.
Yeah, so I like what you're saying. Like, sit around the kitchen table and have a casual conversation about this. So, how do you destigmatize conversations like this in order to be able to have that around the kitchen table? Like, we're all
can.
Hmm.
sitting around eating chicken parm. We're like,
Mm,
"Hey, mom, what do you want to
Chicken
happen if
chicken
you get
parm.
into a car accident?" You know what I mean? How do you? how do we have those conversations in a world that's so concerned about or afraid and shy away from conversations about death?
Well, I think that it's a good time to kind of sit down and bring up, hey, mom, sister, whoever,
Mhm.
let's talk about getting your affairs in order. And you
Yeah.
can bring up the conversation and say, hey, I heard about this mydirectives.com. I went on, I checked it out, I created an advanced directive. Have you ever
Mhm.
thought about doing that sort of thing? Well,
Mm,
what would be
Mhm.
your wishes if you were terminally ill and only had a few days or a few weeks or months left to live? So by doing that yourself, then that's your opening way to open that conversation and say, I want to let you know I've picked you as my healthcare agent. Here's a copy of my advance directive. These are my
Mhm.
wishes. Why don't you tell me what your wishes are?
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, and the question
Smart.
online comes from Jacqueline Robinson. Do hospitals face liability issues when patients want something like assisted suicide or quack treatment like
mm.
horse dewormer, which would be the
The ivermectin.
Oh yeah.
uh, which would be against the hospital's mission?
Good
So,
question.
as far as assisted suicide goes, there are some places where that is legal. I believe that it is legal in Washington, D.C., and the laws specify exactly how that's going down. You can put that in your advance directive. And I was actually looking at a Canadian website, dyingwithdignity.ca, and I was looking at one of the advanced directives in one of the provinces, and it actually had a little section at the bottom that said, medical assisted death is not currently legal, but if it
Mm,
does become legal, what are your wishes?
mm.
And I thought, wow, that's a
Mm.
great idea for people who would want that sort of thing. Um, and you
Yeah.
could put that in your advance directive if it's not legal in your state.
Love that. All right, so we are out of time. So do you have any last words, any shout outs you want to give, anything you'd like to tell our audience? And so just to make sure that, and make sure you can tell them how they can find you and find out more information about you.
Well, I think that mydirectives.com is great. I'm currently working with Bridging Life, which is in the greater Baltimore area and Carroll County. We do have a palliative care program where we will help people with advanced directive, either individuals or groups. I'll come to your church and talk to your church or come to your bridge club, whatever. If you'd like more information, you can contact Bridging Life at 410-871-8000 and ask for help with an advance directive.
Oh, I love it. All right. Well, thank
Awesome.
you
Thank
so
you so
much, Dr.
much,
Simpson,
Dr.
for joining us
Yes.
once
Thank
Marjorie.
again.
you.
We'd love to
Thanks.
have you
Thank
back. We're
you
going to
so
bring you
much.
back when we can and do another For Your Info. But thanks again for joining us. I really appreciate you. See you next time.